God, your inner wisdom is calling you to do something better and greater with your life. 2014 to 2020 were very easily the hardest years of my life to date. The truth still remains that just because something isn't your fault doesn't mean it isn't your responsibility. Some of you who for the past several years have just been making it through the day, and honestly, you were at your wit's end of simply making it through the day. And any woman who is watching this right now and feels like she's in a dark place or who has been in a dark place, just know that where you are right now is a breeding ground for growth and an opportunity for acceptance and change. Hello, ladies, and welcome to the second episode of Her Sacred Threads podcast, a podcast created specifically for women who are looking to live their truth, reclaim their story, and create a life of transformation and purpose. I am your host, Bree. I would like to start this episode out with a confession. You know, life really has a way of humbling you, and on my journey, I found that radical acceptance is a major part of that humbling process. Specifically, radical acceptance of the here and now. Several months ago, I went to the park to script out this podcast episode. It was a beautiful, gorgeous summer day, and I remember just taking a moment to take in the scenery and feeling so mesmerized by how picturesque this landscape looked until the wind came. And I saw it almost as a disturbance to this beautiful landscape, which when still looked like the perfect picture. I found myself getting frustrated by its presence. And as I am sitting there in my frustration, it was like all of a sudden something just landed on me. And it was this unexplainable cosmic feeling of being able to deeply relate to what it was I was seeing. And as I'm having this emotion, immediately the quote, "If you want to understand yourself, look at nature," comes to mind. And so my mind starts going, and I said to myself, I wonder if wind benefits plants. And so I did what any millennial would do. I pulled out my phone and I looked it up on Google, and sure enough, wind does benefit plants by making the stems thicker and stronger. You know, I just started saying that to myself, thicker and stronger, thicker and stronger. In that moment, I couldn't help but to relate what I had just read to the human experience. The stems, to me, were like the backbone of the plant. And the backbone is strengthened in the face of adversity. But more importantly, the plant never moves. It stays rooted right where it is, and still it grows in fullness and in color. And so as I'm sitting here thinking about my life for the past 2 to 3 years, I would say a reoccurring theme or emotion for me has just been this feeling of being stuck somewhere I just sincerely don't want to be. Physically, mentally, emotionally, you name it. For some of you, you share that same sentiment. Maybe you feel stuck in your relationship or the city that you live in or the job that you work for. Maybe you feel stuck in your finances or with your weight, or stuck with the fact that it's been several years and you just can't seem to find that special someone no matter how hard you try or don't try. Feeling stuck in my career and in my personal life really had me on a roller coaster of ups and downs. So one day, body and the mind do what they do best. They shut off the emotional faucet and you start to become numb to the feeling of being stuck. And if you're not careful to manage your perspective, being stuck can feel inescapable. If you feel like you can't escape something, you usually stop trying to and you just become complacent. And that complacency becomes your routine. And eventually, that routine becomes what we call our life. I think we all can be honest and say that the humdrum of a mundane life can be shitty, right? And it's even worse when you realize why it is so crappy. And 9 times out of 10, a mundane life is crappy because you won't do anything about it. And most of us don't want to hear that, right? Because a lot of who we are is tied to experiences and people that we didn't ask to be tied to. For instance, some of you may have mommy and daddy issues. You didn't ask for those people to be your parents, but something about your past experiences with your parents is still affecting you to this day. Some of you have had unfortunate things happen to you in your childhood. You didn't ask for those things to happen to you, but you're still dealing with the effect of those things to this day. And I could go on ad nauseum of all of these different things that happen to us that are out of our control and not our fault. The truth still remains that just because something isn't your fault doesn't mean it isn't your responsibility. At some point or another, we have to be able to look ourselves in the mirror and take full responsibility for the person who was staring back at us. And at a very basic level, for some of us, taking on that responsibility merely looks like just getting through the day. And I want to be very clear that is okay. It is an accomplishment in and of itself. And if that is where you are, that is simply where you are in your process. That said, there are some of you who, for the past several years, have just been making it through the day. And honestly, you were at your wit's end of simply making it through the day. Life, God, your inner wisdom is calling you to do something better and greater with your life, but you just won't do it. Or you tried, but you fail, and then you find yourself going back to a mundane life. To all of you, I want to say that I see you, I sympathize with you, and I deeply understand where you are. And for that reason, I want to share a story with you all. 2014 to 2020 were very easily the hardest years of my life to date. In that span of time, I experienced a lot of loss in a lot of different ways. I had multiple family members and a friend die in that timeline. I watched people that I love dearly go to prison, which when you lack their physical presence in your life, it feels like a loss. I walked away from my relationship, which was 8 years of friendship and 4 years of romantic partnership. I ended all different kinds of relationships that I felt no longer served me anymore. And I can't forget the biggest loss of them all. Me. Because in 2017, I was diagnosed with Hashimoto's disease and hypothyroidism. This was an experience that literally turned my world upside down. And I felt like I completely lost myself to my diagnosis. That said, that story could be a Dr. Phil episode all on its own, so I won't go too deep into that, but I will say the experience was emotionally and mentally debilitating. And if you are not careful to manage your health and stay in control of it, Hashimoto's disease and hypothyroidism will get in the driver's seat of your life and take over. And it will have you looking in the mirror, not knowing who the hell is staring back at you. So during the earlier years of my diagnosis, all I had the capacity to do was make it through the day and live my mundane life with my mundane routine until one day I became sick and tired of literally being sick and tired. I couldn't go another day doing the same thing over and over and over again. So what did I do? I did what most people do. I looked for an ego booster, something that would boost my ego and result in a temporary high. And for most of us, that temporary high is attributed to what I like to call the if onlys. If only I had went to school. If only I had that job. If only I was in this relationship. If only I lived in that city, in this house, with this car, right? My personal temporary high or if onlys has always been success. My ego is stroked by succeeding, accomplishments, and being the very best at something. So I started chasing my high. I would achieve and it would feel good and I would ride that high until inevitably I'd come back down from it. And in an effort to feel good again, I would look for that next dopamine hit of success. And over again, I would ride this roller coaster of emotional instability, of extreme highs and extreme lows. And to constantly be living on either extreme, not only was it not sustainable, it wasn't healthy. Instead of constantly living in too many highs or constantly living in too many lows, I needed to find my middle ground. For me, finding that middle ground started with me addressing my perspective of my if onlys. Because at first glance, it looks like you're chasing a temporary high. And you may think you're chasing something, when in reality, what you might really be doing is running from something. And 9 times out of 10, what we are running from is ourselves. We're all human beings with pasts, stories, traumas, and we're all wounded. And let's be real, nothing about a wound is pretty. It's messy. And the only way to keep a wound from staying messy is to address it. And make sure it has the proper medication. You wrap it, right? And you continue to repeat that process until the wound is healed. Well, I've got news for you. Internal wounds work the exact same way. Until you address your wounds, your pain, your trauma, you will not heal. And as a result, You will continue to feel stuck. You will continue to feel like your life lacks purpose and meaning. I've got good news. Here's the beautiful thing about triggers and wounds. A trigger will lead you to your wound. Your wound will lead you to your path, and your path will lead you to your destiny. So to all of you out there who are struggling with being stuck, it is the very thing that you are avoiding that is keeping you from escaping that feeling of being stuck. If you want out, you have got to stop running from you. You have to start taking full responsibility for yourself. Because here's the beautiful thing that happens when you look in that mirror and you take full responsibility to that reflection staring back at you. You open yourself up to a grander perspective of yourself and life. And in this new grand perspective, what you come to realize is that you were never stuck. You were rooted. You were exactly where you needed to be, when you needed to be there, experiencing what you needed to experience. And although it may not have felt like it, those experiences were preparing you to bloom. And so to take it back to the nature reference earlier, here's the thing about flowers or trees or any plant for that matter. Before it blooms, its seed is buried deep in darkness. And it is under the condition of darkness that seed is able to properly develop. It is also in the darkness where the seed develops its foundation, the very thing that keeps it grounded, its roots. And after the seed has withstood an extended period of darkness and built its foundation, that is when it begins to bloom and develop into a flower or a tree or whatever the case may be. And just like human beings, even after it blooms, it will still face adversity, strong winds, aggressive storms, hard winters. But because the foundation was built in the darkness, all the adversity does is make the plant stronger. And so to any woman who is watching this right now and feels like she's in a dark place or who has been in a dark place, just know that where you are right now is a breeding ground for growth and an opportunity for acceptance and change. I'm going to tell you a quick story and then I'm going to close out today's episode. 4 years ago, I was in an acting class and I was in a scene that really struck me emotionally, but I wouldn't allow myself to feel the emotion. And so finally, my acting coach looked at me and says, "Why do you keep doing that?" And I said, "Why do I keep doing what? Why do you keep stopping yourself from feeling the emotion? Why don't you just allow yourself to break?" And I said, "Because I was always taught that life is hard, that it will come and push you down, but you got to get up and you got to fight back." And he looked at me, he said, "Okay." He said, "But sometimes when life beats you down to the ground, you got to lay there and take those punches. So when you get back up, you know what you're fighting for." And so to all of you who are in a dark place, sitting with your emotions is like taking those punches. And after you overcome this, when that next trial comes, you'll know how to take it to the chin, because the foundation of who you are was built to withstand the darkest of times. Look at me. You've got this. You were simply built for it. Period.